fmtraining.tv, the daily live stream where we talk about the fantastic and amazing FileMaker platform 5 days a week on 3 different platforms. We do this all the time. The FileMaker platform is fantastic and legitimately one of the most amazing low-code platforms you can get for database software. We love the fact that we have done this for many, 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 many years, and we continually talk about new things as well as recapping some old stuff. Tells you there's a lot to discuss. I am very lucky to be here today with HOnza Koudelka and Vince Menanno from 24U and Beeswax, respectively. HOnza has been very graciously hosting a lot of streams for us pretty much every Thursday for the last month and a couple Thursdays going forward. We've talked about a really amazing variety of techniques. I have been recommending that Richard and Jacob catch up on some of these streams when they've missed them because they have been that fantastic. They cover a lot of some more complicated niche topics in the FileMaker community that aren't necessarily always discussed, and they should be. So it's been a real delight to have them on. Today we're doing local file editing, which I'll be excited to hear the details about. Okay, I think we're probably good. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to HOnza and Vince. So, HOnza, what's happening today?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be back here just 2 days before leaving to the Engage U conference in Malmö, Sweden, where I will meet Vince in person again. But for now, we are here to talk about performance topics. Like in the few episodes before, I started a series of streaming interviews with people who are somehow convinced to make FileMaker solutions faster in different ways or test performance of FileMaker and share the results and share the techniques that they find out. And Vince is one of them. And a few years ago, I don't recall how many, but it will be a few years, he presented something that he presented under a very interesting topic name called being an optimist in the pessimistic world. That was an amazing title, and even just this title brought my attention. And when I went to that session, it was one of the first sessions after a long time where literally the whole session I considered interesting after almost 30 years of experience with FileMaker. So just if you're not still fixed to your chairs and fully concentrated on what we are talking about, now is the time to concentrate, because what you're going to see, if you have not seen Vince's session yet, is going to amaze you. So Vince, tell me something, and everyone, about how you came to inventing your local file editing technique. What you have been doing so far until that moment, and what was the first discovery point that changed your life? I think it did change your life, right?
Yeah, definitely changed our lives. So thank you, HOnza. I'm glad to be here. And thank you for the introduction. What we're talking about today is something that you've probably seen before in different maybe applications. And I'll share my screen on one thing that I'll show really quick. So here's address book. Can you see that, HOnza? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so address book, I have my email here. I want to change it. I don't change it directly. I have to go through a process. So I click the edit button. Now I have the ability to edit my email, right? And then I click done. So based on this kind of approach, we wanted to do something similar to control that workflow in the user experience. And it started off really as, let's take the data, let's put it in a global, let the user modify it. And then, so like a popover panel, you put some globals in the popover panel, and then you click a button and it collects that data from, 3 or 4 fields, and then it sends it to the server and it transacts it. So that was the first approach. It iterated, from there to look in and see how we could do this in different ways, and then
And this
we'll
this is
evolve.
this is very familiar approach, right? How many? Let's do a little bit of voting. How many people here already have used this approach using global fields to edit records with a script instead of doing it just by or committing records by running a script instead of just clicking somewhere else? How
Say
many people
yes,
say yes?
yes. Use that approach last used with open transaction. Yes. Someone said not yet. I have used globals to edit. More yeses. So
Yeah, so people
So
seem to be familiar with that. So let's
okay,
go on. What was the next approach, and
yeah,
what led you to change it?
yeah. So the next approach was, to evolve it. Like we got card windows. Then we said, okay, well, we have a card window, which is nice because it attaches itself to the window, right? So that window. So if you have multiple windows open for different projects, and you have the card window open, now you have this card window that is attached to that instance, and you make a change. However, the problem with that was, oh, well, if you have a global and you're editing this project in this window, if you go to this other window, there'll be a bleed. Like this global now picks up the data from the record that you started editing, and the last one that you were editing now has the global value from the one that you just opened up. So like now you have cross-pollination of data, which is a bad thing. And now, we had to solve that problem. And so the card window was cool, but we had to solve this other problem. And one approach was like, oh, well, let's use a web viewer, and let's put the web viewer in a card window, and then let's, load all the data into like a web experience. And we went down that approach, and we wanted to do that way, but we backed out of that because we decided we wanted to keep it as simple as possible and not to burden our FileMaker developers with the need to understand a web coding environment and JavaScript and all this. So we didn't want to overcomplicate it. So we backed up a little bit, and then as discussions would have it with me, myself, and Brendan and Red, at some point we landed on this idea that I seem to have remembered, we have what is it? We had received global, what is it? Global variables for the file reference, right? So you could define a global variable path to a file reference.
Yeah,
So
I recall that was introduced in FileMaker 16 that we were able, or 17, that we were able to define a dynamic path to a external file data
yeah.
source.
So at one point we said, well, if we have a dynamic path, well, what if we had we have a hosted file, but then how we came about, exactly how we landed on the discovery of the external local file, I don't remember exactly. It might have gone back as far back as when I worked with Jeff Coffey in Arizona, and he showed me one day he stuck a FileMaker file inside a container. And I was like, what are you doing that for? I was like, well, you can put anything you want in a container. So I'm putting a FileMaker file inside the container. And then somehow piecing that together with what we're doing, somehow we came upon this idea that, well, what if we had the FileMaker file that the solution was referencing in the graph be deployed at the time that you launch the system? So what happens is you open up the file that's hosted, and as part of opening it up, you deploy, you export this file that's inside your container to a temp directory. And then you get a file, then you get a path to that file, and that's your external data source reference. It's a file that's now on your machine, but it's got all the tables and information that you would need to be able to create data and edit data. And so the table occurrences that then show up on the graph in your FileMaker system, half of them come from the tables that are in a file that is hosted, and the other group of tables come from a file that is deployed on your machine.
Now, people may be asking, why would you do such a crazy thing? What benefit do you get by doing this?
Yeah, so the benefit is the following. If you're if you know there's always the communication between the client and the server. And if you install the clarisconfig.json file with two flags in it, force output, and I'll have to get the other one. I don't remember the other one. But if you put that in your applications directory and then you launch FileMaker, you'll get a dbdebug.log file, and that will show you every time there's traffic going, like a request from the server, like it'll write that out in the log, and you'll get a send and a reply, like a request and a reply. And for the most part, that's the information. There's additional information about that, but not enough time to get into all those details here. But just the idea that you could see the traffic that is happening. Now, if you're in a system that is hosted, and you go into a view where you're looking at a portal, and you start creating records through the portal, you'll see the traffic happening every time you start adding rows in the portal, or you click outside the portal, or you click in the white space. Basically, you're committing whatever you have, and then there's traffic to commit that data, etc. So with the local file, once you've established the card window, and the card window is based on a layout that is on a table that comes from the local file, there is no more traffic on the network because all the traffic is local, right? So you create records, they're in a local table. And so basically, once you compare those differences of writing all the data locally, and then when you're done, packaging it up into a JSON, sending it to the server and transacting it, there's a big reduction in the number of calls and the amount of data. And so the other benefit is that we see is by doing this technique, if you're on a WAN and you're very far from the server, when you start making edits to some record, you basically lock that record for the duration of the time that you're editing, and keeping that record locked for other users prevents other users from editing it, makes the system a little bit more tied up, let's say. Whereas if you approach this as I just want to touch the record and update it, or create the record and commit it, these are very, very quick actions because they actually happen on the server.
So this is basically what you were referring to when talking about being optimistic or pessimistic, right? That optimist is hoping that the editing will succeed when you submit the edits, while being pessimistic means, well, I don't want anyone to touch that record until I'm finished editing, because I'm afraid that someone will edit it behind my back, and it will collide with my edits. So when you're normally editing a record and it takes you 5 minutes, for 5 minutes no one else can touch that record. But with this technique, as Vince is describing, you just touch the record for a millisecond, then everyone can work with it, and then you touch it again for another millisecond when you're saving your changes.
That's correct. And FileMaker is pessimistic in its behavior because it locks the record, right? And doesn't let anybody change it until you commit it, right? So that keeps the record locked. And then you'll get a message like, if I'm locking a record that you want to edit, you'll get a message that Vince is, editing this record, and you have to wait till he's done, basically.
It may be important to mention one thing about the record locking, and that's editing or making changes to the record is not the only case where FileMaker logs the record, because FileMaker logs your record even when you're on the record layout and you're editing something in the related records over a portal.
That's
it's very common that out of 10 cases when FileMaker logs a record, in 9 cases, it's not because you want to change that record, but because you want to change some other record. So that's a good reason if you design your solution well to consider the optimistic approach, because it does not really need to always happen that when someone wants to log the record, it's for making changes. It may be for making changes somewhere else, and if you prevent that, you make many people happy.
That's right. That's a good point. The record, like, so if you have like an order and you got order items and you're editing the price for the order item, you've not only locked the order item record that you're on, but you've locked the parent that the portal of the set of records that record belongs to. So you're locked both records, and no other user can make changes to it. So like if you've got shipping information that someone else needs to update on the order, they have to wait till your order entry items changes have been submitted so that can happen. Now, one could say like, oh, well, what if, your transaction, if you've got a very busy system, what if two people are trying to update the same record at the same time? You're going to get a conflict there. But the way to resolve that is really like, again, you have to remember that these transactions, when they occur on server, they're very, very quick. And you can measure them to see how long they take in each circumstance, because depending on how complex your record is and all the auto enter calcs, etc., they may take different amounts of time to commit the record. However, when you're trying to get a lock on the record, you could put in a small loop and say, okay, let me wait just for 1/10 of a second or something, and let me try again. So again, if the user so two users update the same record, one will get a lock, one will wait just a little bit momentarily, the other one commits, then the next time around, the other one gets committed as well. So you can even handle high volume cases where you've got like lots of activity.
Yeah, so before you show how it actually works, David Angel in Discord is making a comment about using the new open transaction and commit transaction, that he can actually do open transaction, pause, and then depending on whether pressing commit button or cancel button, it can commit or cancel the transaction. So can you comment on that, how that approach differs from the local file editing, and what are the benefits compared to this specific technique?
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with that approach, although we haven't really gone down that path, just because, again, we're also looking at reducing the network traffic. And so with this technique, you're reducing the amount of traffic that happens on the network. With the other technique, I don't have much experience, so I can't comment on it and say what the pros and cons are with it. But I'm assuming that if you're doing it over the network, you'll still have that traffic. And some other issues to consider with serial numbers and things like that you might have to look and figure out. But again, no experience directly with it.
And you still have that record logs.
Yeah, and I believe you would have record locks, of course, because you're starting to make changes to records. So again, I don't have a lot of experience with it. So
yeah. So regardless of whether you commit or cancel a transaction, you still have the record locked for all the time. And if you're making like multiple records, it's still causing network transactions to happen between client and a server, because for every new record created, every new record log, FileMaker Pro sends another request to the server to actually log that record before it proceeds. So it's still chatty even if you use transactions. It's just a little bit less chatty than when you don't.
Yeah, and with our technique, you can also use transactions. So you send the package, the JSON package, to the server, and you can, you can open the transaction and do whatever your code needs to do. Go to this layout, create a record, go to this other layout, create all these other records, and then commit the transaction. As long as that all happens within the same window, you're actually working within a transaction. So you can benefit from the use of transactions as well.
Okay, so are you ready to show something?
Yeah, let me play this here. So this is just showing, the mechanics of the local file. Okay, so basically, I'll show how you set it up, but right now I'm just showing like a little bit like the address book example. I click the button. I have a layout that is showing in a card window. That layout is coming from the local file. And just to prove that, I'm going to open up the local file. And that local file is the local file that got deployed to my desktop. And I'm going in there. I'm going to add a layout so we can see the data. Okay, I'm going to put the fields on the layout. Okay, and then we'll see the data that's in there, right? So that data that you see on the left that comes from the card window is coming from a table occurrence on the graph that is tied to the local file that got deployed on the user's machine. Okay, so now if I close the card window, the script that will run is this script here, close card. It will delete the record, and so it'll delete the record that I'm on, which will delete the local record. And so if we run that, we close the window, you'll see the record disappear on the right. Now I'm going to do the same thing, fill it out. There's Vince. This time I'm going to change the script. I'm going to disable the delete of the record. So I close the card window, but I'm not deleting the record. The record stays in the local file, right? So now I'm going to close that file, and I'm going to open it up again, and you'll see it deploys a new copy of the local file. And if we go look in the local file, that layout that I just added is gone. And the reason for that, that's very important to understand. The reason for that is because every time you open up the hosted file and you're gonna build with this architecture, you have to understand you're deploying a new copy of the local file. So you also have to understand how to manage the local file. And I'll show another video to talk a little bit about that as well. So let me pause there. Let me see if there's any questions or you have any questions, HOnza.
Well, not so far. I do understand it, but maybe the audience can have some questions. Margaret, are you getting them?
Not like people are commenting, but they're not having questions. I'm hoping that's because they're riveted, this is riveting. So,
Margaret, I can't wait for you to try this. Looking forward to seeing what your feedback is on it. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's move on. I'll show you how to establish the file reference, deploy the local file, some tips and tricks about that, etc. So in this video, we'll see here on my graph there I have two tables. I have a main file and then I have a solution table. So the solution table has two fields in it, and it has the file name and a container. The container will hold a copy of your local file, okay? And so normally the solution table should be a single record, a table with a single record, and that's where you would insert your local file. Okay, so that's all that is. And if I show the solution, there's the container field. Basically, I drop my local file. I'll open it up first, and I'll just show you what it looks like. It's just got a table called local file. It's got a name field, right? And so now I'm going to take that. I'm going to put it in there. There's an auto enter calc that gives me the name of the local file. And so now I'm going to go to external data sources. I already have a data source defined with a global variable, but I haven't run the script that exports the local file. So I'm going to pause here and talk about this script a little bit. So what this script does is this script would run on a layout that is on a table that is hosted. You don't want to go to a layout that is from your local file because you haven't established the file reference yet. And if you do that, what's going to happen is it's going to complain and say, where is this file? I don't know where this file is. So you want to make sure that you stay on a layout that is part of your hosted solution, and you run these steps. And what these steps are basically is it's going to write out that file that is in the container, right? And it's going to write them out with the file write steps. And the reason for that is because you can do export field contents, but that gives you kind of like a little dialogue, and this avoids getting that little dialogue, and this a little bit more efficient as well. So we established the file reference, and you'll notice here, step 12, I have the desktop path or the temporary path. If I'm full access, I can put it on my desktop so I can easily get to it, etc. But normally you would just put it out of the way somewhere, and the user doesn't know about it. And then we established the global variable, and then that global variable is what is used in the external data sources, and the external data source then will point to that file that is on your machine. Okay, so if we run this, so let's see here. Yeah, we define that. So we run it. We've now got a local file on our desktop. And so now we're good to go. We go back to the graph. Let's add that table occurrence from that local file. It'll ask you if you want to authorize it. It'll only ask you the first time for this. And then so you say yes. And now you have a table occurrence from a file that is on your machine, right? And then you notice that that table occurrence name is in italics. That table occurrence name comes from your global variable file reference. Okay, so now we have that. If I go to layout mode, I have this layout called local file. I'm going to change that context to come from the local file. And now because it's coming from the local file, I had that one field in that one table, and I could put that on the layout. And then this button basically just opens up a card window to show the card window, a new card, go to the layout called local file and create a new record, right? So I run that. Now here's my local file. It's got a new record in there. Type Vince, there's Vince. And that's in my local file. So far, so good? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, now, I mean, it's all just FileMaker. It's really easy. It really is just really, really easy. There's only a couple things you have to be careful about, which I will mention. But so now let's say, oh, I want to make a change, right? So that local file, you notice that even though I close the local file, it's still in the window menu. It's still in the window menu, even though I closed it.
Wait a minute. David is writing in the Discord that he got lost. So let me try to just briefly repeat what you have said. So basically, we have a hosted file. The one with the yellow footer here is the file that's hosted on a FileMaker server, right? So in that file, Vince has defined external data source, which is not pointing to a specific file, but it's pointing to a variable. So there is a global variable used in that external data source as a path to the external file. Yeah, here you can see it. So while the variable is empty, this reference to that external file is invalid. So what Vince is doing in a startup script as a first thing, he exports the local file into a local folder for the user. It can be on a desktop or in a temp folder. So Vince is using desktop for development purposes so that he can easily debug it. But for a regular user, he exports it into a temporary folder, which is hidden for the generic user. And after or before exporting the file, he sets that global variable to the path to that exported file. And as soon as he sets that variable, the external data source becomes valid. So if the first time the external data source is being used is after he sets that variable, then the external data source is actually pointing to that exported file. I hope that was clear now. David, are you back?
The export file has a different path depending on the platform.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mac or Windows, it's just, you can use the get function to get the temporary path and then
Yes.
just write. Yeah. So you
So,
know,
so as long as you use the get function to get the folder path and you just append the file name to the folder path, you're good and you're good on any platform.
yeah. Yeah. And I will say that once you've deployed the local file and you start using it, like you call a script in it, or you go to a table occurrence that is referenced that comes from the local file, it's like flypaper. You can't get rid of it. It's stuck.
Mhm.
You cannot until you close the file, you cannot close the local file. It will stay open. It's FileMaker behavior. That's why, like, I showed over there when I close the file, right? So from over here, if I close this file, right, it's not
Yeah.
gone. It's still there. I can't get rid of it.
There is a great question from Twitch. Does this technique work on FileMaker Go as well?
Yes, I don't remember on FileMaker WebDirect. There's some special things, but we don't use it on WebDirect so much. But anyway, I don't have a lot of experience with WebDirect, but it will work on FileMaker Go and FileMaker Pro. Okay, so we're here. The next steps would be okay. So I'm going to modify my local file. I added another field. I'm going to put the email field on there. So now I have two fields in my local file, but I want to update the copy that's in my solution folder. So what I do first is I'm going to open up the solution file. I'm going to open up my file. I'm not going to go to the graph because then it's going to complain and say, where's the local file? Because I haven't deployed it yet. And all I'm going to do is just replace the copy that is on my desktop from the last time I did this and update the local file. Now, if I export it and deploy it now, you'll see that now I have this layout. I can go to the layout. I can make changes. I have this other field. It's coming from the local file. Now I have the email field, the email field, right? So now the email field is there. So now I have name and email, and there's the local file, right? Name and email. And now I have both fields, right? I can put data into those fields.
This is
right?
insane. Sorry, I know that I'm just supposed to be watching, but this is nuts. Sorry. This is extremely cool.
It is. Once you start using this, you can't go back. It's just an incredible, and it's all just FileMaker. That's the beauty of it. There's nothing hard about this at all. The only tricky thing is to manage the fact that, like, you're editing a local copy and then you have to update the hosted copy, and we have a whole kind of set of scripts to do that in our solutions to manage that, and we put together an add-on for that local file management set of scripts that we hope to release so that you can get that information as well. So you should not copy the local file while it's in use and update it, because you're going to copy a file that is open, and you can cause problems like that. So let's see what else there is in this video. I don't remember here. Oh yeah. So the other thing is the file starts out with no data in it because you have no records in it. You could create it as a clone and put it back into the container. But what you could do is, if you really want to make it like locked down, you create a table that is empty with no fields in it. You put some background on it, like whatever. And now I have a table, a solution. I'm gonna take that copy I just edited it. I'm gonna close the local file. I'm gonna close the main file. I'm gonna go update my copy that I just put in there, right? So I'm going to put in a new copy. And now when I go use it, right, what I'm going to see is if I go choose the local file, it's just a blank layout. And if I go and open it up, there's no layouts I can get to. It's just completely empty. The layouts that have the tables, they're removed. You don't need them to show because they're going into data inside that file, and you don't need to expose that. As a matter of fact, you could deploy this file with a an account name and password that is completely locked out. The user could go here and not have access to anything, right? So it still works. You still can put data into your fields, right, and fill it out, etc., just like you would. But the local file is locked for all intents and purposes. And people will say, well, some people about security. Well, what about security? Well, if I have access to the hosted data and I pull down a copy temporarily, it's no different than taking a screenshot of that layout or copying the contents or of that record. I basically have access to that record. And if I edit it temporarily in a local copy, and once I'm done and I package it up in JSON and send it to the server, and then I remove my local copy, it's as if that data never existed. It just exists temporarily on the computer's machine, and it's locked in a file that they can't get into. So in a sense, it's, we could have arguments about security there, but I don't think we've had any issues with it really. So I'll stop there in case there's more questions, and then I have one more video to show.
Could this work even if the connection is temporarily disconnected?
Temporarily disconnected, like you have like a little bit of Wi-Fi hiccup or something like that?
I think that's what they're asking.
Yeah, I guess if it reconnects, I mean the global variable file reference, once you're reconnected to the file, should still work.
Yeah, if FileMaker disconnects and reconnects, it keeps the global variables, so it does work, and it does not trigger the startup script. So you just continue working as you were before the disconnect. There's one thing to mention about the dynamic data source using the global variable. If you are editing your database, it's important to note that if you don't establish the data source, don't put something valid, a valid path to the file in the global variable. As soon as FileMaker needs to make that external data source valid, it will complain that it doesn't know where the database is. And normally when a user uses the database, you can control when this happens. But when you are developing it, it can happen as soon as you open the relationship graph, or just go to a script that that uses something from that related file. So it's important when developing on a solution like this, the first thing when you open it, make sure you establish those dynamic data sources to valid files before you continue developing.
All right, so now we're going to see some of the benefits of why you would want to do something like this. So, like I said before, there is a set of flags that you can turn on to generate what is called the DB debug log, and the DB debug log looks like this. Okay. So when you have those flags and the file that you would put in is a file that looks like it's called Claris config.json. It's just a text file, it's just a JSON file, and it has this JSON with these two items. Force output is true, remote calls is true. And once you have that HOnza, remind me again where this goes on Windows. I know on the Mac it goes.
You can put it in the documents folder and it works.
Okay, and in the applications directory.
Or you can put it in the same directory where you have the FileMaker Pro application.
Yeah. So once you have that in there and you restart FileMaker, you'll start seeing the data show up in this log file. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, where is it here? Oh, this is, okay, let me just hide that. So, so what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to compare what native FileMaker behavior is like and what you're going to see in the DB debug log versus an approach that uses our local file technique and sends data to the server to be transacted. So what I'm doing to measure this is I'm using a FileMaker file that reads the log output from DB debug log and reads the last line, the last position in the file, and it says, okay, I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to do some work, and then when I say stop, it's going to read from that last point, and then it's going to read that file in and create records for all that data, and then we're going to flatten that data because there's usually a send and a reply. We're going to flatten that data, and we're going to see like an aggregated total of number of calls, number of bytes sent, number of bytes received, and a duration. So we'll get a result for what FileMaker native behavior is, and a result for what the local file technique is for doing about the same kind of work. Okay, so here on this side, I started my logging. And now I'm going to start entering some data in a project record that has related task records. And you'll see in the bottom window, as soon as I click outside in the white space, you'll see that it will commit the record and you'll see log information start to show up. Okay, that's because it's communicating with the server and saying, whatever it needs. Like if I click in the white space, it commits that data. It says, okay, I'm committing data. I'm looking up a value list or whatever. There's, a bunch of information that happens behind the scenes. And it's great to sometimes look at this log to see all the mechanics of, how things are going on. So basically I created a project record with 3 tasks. Okay, now I'm going to stop it. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to open up my other file, and that other file is the one that uses the local file technique. And now I'm going to run another test. I'm going to start. I'm going to name it. This will be a local file. Okay, so I'm going to create now. Note I'm going to clear my log. Okay, I have. If you notice here, I have a project record. And I have a bunch of related task records, right? Now I'm going to click outside. You notice I clicked in the white space. No data was sent to the server. If you look in the log behind there in that window, there's no data going to the server. I can make changes to records. It's super fast because it's all local. There's no traffic going to the server. Okay.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's so cool, Margaret. It is so true. And so now I'm done. I'm going to create the record. It's sent to the server. It's transacted. And look at the amount of traffic I just created. Almost nothing. Okay. So now I'm going to run the aggregation summary. And now here, this is where we see the results. Okay. So I would say everything here is accurate except for the elapsed time. There's some problem where I'm aggregating this incorrectly, but don't look at that. Don't worry about that. So what you want to look at is the number of calls, right? So the local file had 5 calls, basically maybe some overhead to get the caching of the script because maybe it's the first time I call the script, whatever. But once you're in it, there's no more traffic. You're basically just doing, stuff locally. But again, this is where you start seeing some of the benefits. And I can talk about other benefits in a little bit from using this. But I'll pause here to see if there's any questions.
Yes. Is there a way to identify the fields of the log? It's very practical to see the exchanges, but it doesn't allow you to identify what's involved.
Okay, so download with lock, operation 90. Yeah, these things can be a little bit obtuse to figure out. Just like the top call log has an ID, you have to then match up the ID to like, okay, that's a table ID. Let me go look up the table ID that has that ID. Oh yeah, that's the session table. So, but in this case, you know, that is a good question.
I don't think there is a field identification, but it does not really matter because FileMaker, we already know that whenever you edit a record, it sends the whole record regardless of which fields you're editing. So what really matters is the table ID, which is included in the log, but the fields do not matter. It always sends the whole record.
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks, HOnza. But yeah, you see here the table ID 166. That's probably the either the project table or the task table. But anyway, those are obfuscated.
Yeah. But there is one more thing worth mentioning that you mentioned in the first session where I saw you talking about this technique, and that was that weird maybe bug or weird behavior that even with global fields,
Oh yeah.
sometimes you notice that data was actually traveling between the client and the server, and it was even a container data, right?
Yeah. So yeah, what you're referring to is we had a technique a long time ago where we would allow you to put, let's say, an Excel file inside a container field, and then we would take that container data and put it in a record that is hosted. So the container now moved from what we thought was locally, and now it got transferred into a record that is hosted. And so if you've got a 2 MB Excel file, you put it inside that record that is in the hosted file. Now that record is technically on the server. Then we run a script to say, go find that record, export it to some directory like that I have access to, documents directory, temp directory, get a path to it, import the data on the server. Okay. And what we were finding was, and I think it was Chris Irvine had this conversation with Clay at a DevCon at one point in the hallway. He says, "Hey, I'm noticing with the global that you're sending network traffic when I put data in a container." And he says, "Yeah, it's like some old behavior, and we never, changed it." So what the way we get around that is we create a local record, and we let the user put the container data in a local record, and then we transfer it to the server. The other way with the global, we were actually transferring the file 2 times to the server. Every time you put it in a global as a container, that data is actually moving to the server, even though you think it's in a global and it's local. It's actually being moved to the server. Now I don't know if I think it's only with containers.
There's another question from Twitch, which I'll forward on to you. We take pictures of FileMaker Go on a hosted file. Would this benefit from this technique?
We take pictures on a hosted file. You're taking pictures so that you can send them onto into a solution that is hosted. Basically, you're collecting images that let's say an inspection or something like that, right? So you're taking pictures. Yeah, I mean,
I think it would, because historically taking pictures on hosted files takes forever because you have to upload the photo into the container. So it's
eventually you'll still have to bite that bullet. You'll still, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, HOnza, you'll still have to send them some way, somehow.
Yes, but well, I can imagine at least two cases where this technique would benefit you. One is when, along with the picture, you are also sending some comments or annotation. In that case, you can send less traffic and less packets over the network. So especially when the latency is significant, the number of calls may be more important than the actual amount of data that you're sending. And the other thing is that sometimes you can just minimize the amount of data you send by first inspecting the picture locally and saying, well, hey user, this is too big. Try to use a smaller picture before sending it to the server. So if you use the local file editing, you can still do things like check the size of the picture, check the format of it, whatever. You can generate a thumbnail using the get thumbnail function, which actually generates a smaller version of the picture. So you can control how much data you are sending to the server before doing that. If you use a hosted file, the first thing that happens is that the FileMaker sends the file to the server before you can make any other operations on it. So before you can check how big that file is, it is sent to the server.
Yeah, that's a good point, HOnza. Thank you. Okay, just to recap, again, this technique really just is, taking a basic FileMaker file with tables and fields that you would need to, let's say, create like any data in any one of your tables. And so let's say the project file. Let's say that the project table has, let's say, a dozen fields, but you're really only capturing the name of the project, the budget of the project, when the project is due, and a description. And so you only need those 4 fields in your local file. You don't need all the other fields. You don't need to take a copy of that table and recreate it in the local file. No, you just need whatever fields you need to be able to create and edit that record. So it's very lightweight, it's very focused. And so once you have, that table in there, in that local file, and what you do is you put it in a container, and then you on open, you deploy that local file with the technique I showed you in the script before, which you could probably review the recording later to see the script. But then you deploy that, and now you have a local file that has a table occurrence on your graph that you can then use in a card window to put data in. And then it's just FileMaker scripting. Take the data, put a JSON package together, send it to the server, transact it. So that's the basics of it. But here's the cool part. And eventually, and HOnza will probably also like to chime in on this, but one of the problems with let's say, looking at data that comes from a list in FileMaker is if you have this project list and you have 5 tasks and you want to get the total of each of the tasks and all these details, you might have unstored calcs to get that related data. And if you have those unstored calcs and you put them in this list view, you're going to incur the cost of not only downloading the project records, but for every project record, it's going to send another call to the server to say, hey, go get me all those related task records for this record because I need to calculate the results. And what it's going to do, it's going to affect the entire record and all the records in its entirety for all the related records for each of those projects that are listed in this list view. And so you're going to have a lot more network traffic. So if you build with this approach, and this would be maybe a follow-up discussion at some point, but if you transact the data, and then what you do is you update and aggregate right away the totals of all those related records. Now you have static data, like it's denormalized, I guess the right word is. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but yeah. And so now you just have cached values instead of unstored calcs, which brings another level of responsibility to you as a developer. But now you have static data, and if you look at this project list, all it's going to load is the list of records from the project. It's not going to do this extra work to go and ask for all the related task records for this project and all and so on and so on. And you can measure this easily with a tool like this, and then you'll see the results. So I guess that's a great place maybe to kind of close off on, and then maybe have a further discussion on that in the future. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that you are thinking of creating an add-on to help with this technique, but before you create it, do you have any kind of demo file that people can download?
Yeah, I mean, I have this project and tasks file that I'd have to check and see, because this is part of our framework, and I don't know. You'd have to, let's see. I'd have to see. I'll get back to you. I don't have that right now, but I can send you for the users listening. I can for sure send the Claris config file and the debug.data tester file that I have, so people can start using that debug data to measure things. It's not great. It's a little bit rough around the edges, but it does the job. So it gets you
Just as a reminder, it's not a like fresh new technique. So if you just look up go Google and look for being optimistic in the pessimistic world together with the FileMaker keyword, I'm sure you will find Vince's older sessions about this where there are some download links available as well.
I will share a comment from the group, which is basically Vince/HOnza. This has been a great mind expanding session with great insight explanations. Thank you for sharing. This is very true. My mind has been blown this entire conversation. So
Margaret, I'm waiting for you to get also your feedback. First off, I appreciate the comment, whoever said that. Thank you so much. And
expanding minds is my favorite hobby.
This is legitimately fantastic. I had no idea you could do this. It makes perfect sense when you explain it the way that you can do this. I'm gonna have to rewatch this video because funnily enough, I share a customer with Richard. It's the one customer we both have. He's getting grumpy these days, so he has no patience for junior engineers anymore, which means it's me, which is totally fine. It works for me, and it's honestly a really great experience. But there's a local file that I have to make them download to do certain things on, because there's performance issues with having it happen on a hosted file. But I did not set it up like this, and the way that we set it up is very ugly. So having this be the option instead, and also being able to actually update the local file instead of having to do like the whole rigmarole that I have to go through every single time. I have a new project. You've given me a new project, Vince, is what you've done.
Okay.
In the best sort of way. So I appreciate
it. By the way, when we released the bench test tool, the free database you can use to test the performance of your environment, and we added the results people are submitting back to us on our website, we immediately needed to categorize those results, and any results collected on a local file or locally run tests, we had to separate from all other ones because anything that's run locally in a locally open file is many times faster than anything in a hosted file. So it's not only for performance, but performance is one of the top reasons for considering this technique, because especially when you have a FileMaker server somewhere else on the internet in a cloud, the difference between performance using this technique and just doing it the normal way is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions. A lot of people reiterating this has been a fantastic session. So with that, if you got two are good, I'll wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, HOnza.
Thank you for being with us, and see you in engage you if you're going,
Yeah.
or in the next live stream where we will be talking about performance. And the next one in this series is going to be Philip A. Pulse, and you can take it as a homework to guess what the A stands for.
I'll be thinking about that. All right, everyone. Have a great day. For my live stream people, I will be seeing you tomorrow with Woman Jacob. Hans, I'll be seeing you next week. And Vince, I hope I have you back on soon. Have a
Always a
great
pleasure,
day,
Margaret.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.